Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Warhorn Podcast. My name is Tree16 and with me here I have the Pirate King for episode number 3. So, Pirate, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you, Tree. And I think the most important question, which we've got to open this episode with, is: Are you Team Reza or are you Team Gwen?
I'm Team Kashka. No, but in all seriousness, I'm Team Gwen.
That's good. That's good because that means we're both going to be Team Gwen here. We're going to be rooting for Team Gwen. We want those free skins. We don't want you over on Team Reza to get one. Interestingly, I have a Smurf which also got Team Gwen, so
Oh,
I'm doubly invested in this now. I'm not just invested on one front and I could have my loyalty split. No, no, no. Both my accounts are with Team Gwen, so I'm going to be playing as well. I'm going to be playing a reasonable amount and hoping that that will be enough to get these free skins over to my side.
yeah, I'm not as much of a help to Team Gwen. I basically stare at Excel sheets, and that is my time with Vainglory. It's fun though. Excel sheet Vainglory is probably the best Vainglory.
Yeah, just
Uh,
just stuff the amazing graphics of the 5v5 map, stuff the brilliant soundtrack which has been designed by Georges de Man, who designed this the music for Horizon Zero Dawn. Like stuff all of that amazing stuff about the new update and new map.
so
Excel spreadsheets are where it's at.
I know. I'm telling you, because like math is just so important. You just need like the hard maths, and it is just so fun sitting there making calculators for every ability, for every hero, and yeah, no, the things I do for love, or the things I do for limp.
um, but in terms of the skins which we did get with this new update, we got some pretty awesome looking skins, such as the legendary Vox on Ice one. I
Yes,
noticed some people saying maybe he looks a little bit effeminate in it. Um,
Vox is
I
like by definition effeminate. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah, he is. He's a bit, but he's a nice character, and I really do like this new skin. It has some really awesome effects with it, and then you also have the sort of Chinese New Year Reza and Gwen skins, which listening to their sound effects on them in game is fun enough anyway, because whenever they use certain abilities, you get sort of fireworks sound effects. Plus, watching them in game is brilliant, and then the splash art for, in particular, the Reza one is awesome. I'm not as sold on the splash art for the Gwen, but the Reza splash art's definitely very cool.
Yeah, no, the splash art for Reza. Honestly, it's kind of funny because it looks almost exactly like my cousin, and it was kind of creepy.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it was creepy when the skin came out. I was like, all
It's like,
right, here's
what is my
Reza.
cousin doing in Vainglory?
I know, and it's always funny because it's like we've got Satan himself is my cousin apparently. Like, oh, all right. I didn't know that my cousin was really into chains. Um,
Okay, that now that we've gone down that slightly weird route, I have to say every time that I play on the 5v5 map, I feel like I notice something different visually about it. Whether it's something from the plants in the jungle to when 3.0 in itself came out and they changed the captain minions so they have that little samurai banner with them. That's awesome. Just like those little aesthetic details are what makes 5v5 just so incredibly immersive within each game. Within a 5v5 game, I feel like I'm so much more focused on what's happening than I was in 3v3. Maybe that's because there's more there. Maybe it's because of the soundtrack, or maybe it's because of the incredible visuals.
so it's funny, right? I've noticed that a lot of people going into 5v5 tend to be more aware in than they were in 3v3 because you almost have to be. Uh, and because if you think about it, you're having to deal with an extra two people. The map is so much larger. You're just going to, by nature, be more aware if you're trying to get good, because you have to look around, or else you're gonna get ganked from two ways. Um, if you're in the mid lane. Sometimes from one, sometimes you can get ganked from behind. Sometimes you also have to just like actually try and win your lane matchup and you aren't getting ganked. Sometimes you're the one doing the ganking. Sometimes you just have to sit there and reflex block someone, make sure you secure scout traps. There's just so many different things that you have to do now, and even if you do kind of go on a clock and a mental cycle like you could in 3v3, it's just not as beneficial. Like just being aware of what's going on is just so much more important now. Um, and you are right that every time something happens in 5v5, you just look and oh my gosh, hey, look at this little icon, look at this. The one that I've noticed, and I hate to say this, both for you and the viewers, is the surprising low resolution in uh, in the base as you spawn in. That has been my pet peeve since day one. Have you noticed that? Or am I just insane?
I'm just thinking about it. Uh, I wouldn't say it's something I've particularly focused on, but now you've pointed it out, I'm thinking of it, and actually, yeah, the little platform you spawn in on and you recall to, it's just a little bit. It's a minor thing, really, isn't it? It's not.
It is. No, I
It
know.
does not affect your enjoyment of
No,
the
it
game
it
at
it
all,
it,
really.
it, it, does, it doesn't. That's just one of those personal pet peeves. Um, no, but I really, in all honesty, I do like how the 5v5 map is designed. It's just very weird, right? Because you can start to see like the level design, at least from my perspective, as you start going further into the game. So, for example, they want to make sure that, like in 3v3, the hardest camps to get are the ones that are most valuable to you. So that's why you see generally like the weapon trans are slightly farther in your jungle than the crystal ones. Um, and on the flip side, you have like the gold trans, which are way in the back. Those are supposed to be towed one of these days, by the way.
Yeah. They have shown the Toad model on Twitter. They have tweeted about it. Currently in game, it's not even called a Toad. It's called the Gold Oak. But I am looking forward to having an actual Toad to kill in game in the future. I'm looking forward to killing a Toad. Hashtag see the Toad, everybody. But like, if we're talking about pet peeves, I've got a few pet peeves from these balance changes. Most of them I agree with and are relatively justified, but some of them I think they've overdone it, and some of them really didn't need to happen. Such as, in my opinion, the buff to Kestrel. They buffed her splash damage from at max level 150 to 190, and they decreased the reload time of her glimmer shot arrows as well from 2.7 seconds to 2.4 seconds. According to Nivmet, this gave Kestrel some much needed love. I don't think she needed much love, as I thought she was in a pretty good place anyway, and playing against her in game, they've really overdone it because she's properly strong now.
So it is a very funny idea of overpowered. Give me a second. I want to make sure that I have the data to back myself up. So, uh, if you were to look at Castro and her hero counters, I'm sorry, Pirate, but I'm gonna have to call you out on this one. Uh, her win rate is negative against literally every single hero in the game. I'm not even kidding.
Mm.
Every single hero that is played, Castrol's negative
Yeah,
against.
that is because though Kestrel is such an incredibly high skill cap hero that she takes immense amounts of skill to pull off correctly. But the problem is, this buff means when you are against someone who's very good with Kestrel, it is completely obnoxious to play against, and they can almost carry fights on that. And well, they pretty much can carry fights on their own if they get even the slightest lead. And those slight leads are even easier to obtain in the laning phase because of the buff she's received. So I think they've overdone it personally with that buff. But they've balanced some of the other heroes particularly well, such as Koshgai. last patch in sort of 2.12, she was very, very strong, and she pretty much dominated every jungle matchup you could put her into. Now, while she does do very well around the map, she's no longer as broken as she was. They decreased her movement speed, which I definitely think was positive, and decreased her damage all across her twirly death, which was definitely warranted.
So, yeah, no, it's funny because now we finally have expanded counters to certain heroes. So, for example, um, we see Fortress kind of popping off as one of the better like targeted pocket picks against heroes. He's good against Fortress. He's good against the Koshka. Um, and honestly, he's good against like most anyone right now. In fact, I'd argue he's probably one of the better heroes in the game. Um, you still have like your Flicker, which is good, but not stupidly OP and won't just simply win you games like it used to. Um, you turn over, you have like your good heroes like Idris, right, where he has mostly favorable matches with nearly everyone or everybody, but he's not just gonna instantly win lane. So I do like how um, the game balance overall has been, and I'm honestly impressed how just spiky sometimes that the win rates are because well, when you think about it, we're having to deal with a lot more people, and this is still 5v5. Uh, I'm just surprised that it's nearly as balanced as it is right out of the gate, considering like how broken the 3v3 was for the longest of times.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I really like in terms of the balance changes what they've done with some of the items. In particular, the most notable change out of all of them has got to be to Spellfire, where they've now given it some mortal wounds, and they've decreased the time it ticks for over after you've applied CP damage to someone. But giving it mortal wounds actually makes it much more of a viable item. It's not going to be built in every build, but it will definitely be built a lot more. In particular, it's actually very good on CP Kestrel, as I saw Dowsy point out today on one of his streams, that the Spellfire damage, if someone has Spellfire applied to them and then walks over a Kestrel trap, that then triggers the Kestrel trap. So that means you don't even have to hit someone with a glimmer shot in a trap anymore if you're CP and you've got Spellfire. They just walk over the trap themselves after you've tagged them with one glimmer shot, and then they blow themselves to smithereens. You don't even have to hit them with an arrow to do it. But then the mortal wound change is critical because it means that you no longer have to build a poison shiv somewhere, and it makes CP carries have much more of an option. So now Scarf can do a lot better into something like Kroll because Scarf now has an option to shut down Kroll's sustain.
Yeah, and items like that, it's always been a weird dynamic, right? Because the uneven dynamic of treatment in terms of items was always kind of, at least to me, been pedestalized by the Atlas and God Aegis difference, right? Where each item had your typical straight up defense. Where all right, if you're playing against weapon, you're just gonna pick up a you're just going to pick up a giant metal jacket and use that, and that's going to be your defense. Or if you're trying to get fancy and trying to actually actively counter the enemy hero, go for your Atlas, right? Um, whereas on the flip side, yeah, I guess Fountain is technically a defensive item, but really it was you get the Aegis, or yes, you get the Aegis. Sorry, I'm confusing my names here. You get the Aegis, you use that, and you have the reflex block, one of the most useful abilities in all of Vainglory, and you get that attached to your defense. And a lot of people, for the longest time, thought, "Oh my gosh, this is so unfair. I have to build defense for like carries that have to build extra defense like a reflex block and armor. Oh no, woe is me." Um, and now we're kind of seeing the kind of opposite effect. No, we still do not have like an armor block or something like that, but we're seeing we're seeing things like mortal wounds, which were specific to weapon power heroes, come over to crystal heroes. We're giving more options and more tools towards both sides to do what they actually want to do. Spell Sword allows weapon power heroes to go more towards a crystal or ability based path. Um, as you said, the Spellfire gives more options for crystal carries to counter to hard counter certain carries. So we're given more options in our item choices, and I I do like that.
Yeah, and in also talking about different paths, the CP path did receive a decent change because of the change to Dragon's Eye. So with Dragon's Eye, the change that happened is the crystal power per stack was reduced from 15 crystal power per stack to 12, and the max amount of stacks was increased from 12 stacks to 18 stacks. So it's a very interesting change because previously Dragon's Eye was almost always better than Shatterglass because you'd almost always get enough stacks to outdamage a Shatterglass pretty quickly. Now you have to wait till 6 stacks till you have more CP than a Shatterglass would give you. And then you have to wait pretty much till 8 stacks to have actually caught up on the lost damage you'd have while you're gaining those 6 stacks. So that makes that much less of an influential item, and you see much more shatter glasses being picked up. And then also an interesting change to the CP path, as well as obviously Dragon's Eye and Spellfire changes, is the nerf to Aegis, and this also applies to Metal Jacket and Weapon Power paths, is the fact that Pierce is now a lot less useful because the shielding on Aegis was reduced from 100 to 85, and the shielding on the armor on Metal Jacket was reduced from 140 to 120, meaning that stuff like a broken myth is no longer a necessary item in CP item builds. So it's really good because we're opening up a lot more build flexibility in 5v5, which is always great to see.
Yeah, it is, and you did point out the reduction in defense, which is funny because now it gives my carries in game less of a reason to build defense. Darn you, SEMC. But it, you get more static damage, and that's what I found for most CP characters is that obviously you don't have the stacks, um, and you don't have any piercing, so you're just basically going to get what you're going to get. Maybe you get some extra lifesteal thrown on because you're one of the guys that likes to pick up a Eve, or well, I mean, has anyone picked up Frostburn? There's like no one, right?
Sky, really effective Sky build, which I've been using and Scoundrels approved as well, is you go for a Frostburn Clockwork Dragon's Eye, build in that order generally, because your early damage is actually still pretty solid with a Frostburn and a Clockwork alone, and then Dragon's Eye just ramps that up to crazy levels. You could probably do it with a Shatterglass as well, but with the sort of fights you'll get, it depends how you're playing your Sky. If you're playing your Sky as kiting back an enemy melee carry like a Krull or a Rona, you're probably going to want the Dragon's Eye because you'll be kiting back for a reasonable length of time, and then you use a massive Suri Strike over the entire team and just destroy all of them, and then forward barrage to carry, or you go with the Shatterglass and you just go for the straight backline dive onto those enemy carries. I personally think the Dragon's Eye kiting style is more effective, but just that set of build is really effective on Sky in particular, and that coupled with the fact that her Suri Strike got a cooldown decrease of 2 seconds at max level makes her a much more effective kiting hero than she was previously, and makes her a lot more viable than she was last patch.
Yeah, no. It's funny that you do mention the Frostburn, uh, because with Sky, I mean, she's always been in kind of a funky spot with her build because before it was all right, we're just gonna roll the Broken Myth, because everyone built Broken Myth, uh, and then we start going into other items, and from there it really didn't matter what you built because basically anything worked on Sky. Now we do see a rising Clockwork on Sky, which to me it makes sense when you think about it in theory, but just overall that just feels like such a weird item to put on a Sky who already has so low cooldowns. Um, but it's yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're seeing Clockwork being picked up on most CP carries nowadays because it's even with the nerf it received in 3.0 having its passive ability cooldown reduction, which basically means that when you hit someone with one of your abilities, the cooldown of your abilities go down. It was reduced from 7.5 to 6%, which is reasonable size nerf to its ability to reduce your cooldowns. But even that hasn't stopped it being built on majority of CP carries. If I'm thinking of ones which generally don't build it, you're looking towards stuff like your CP Idris, who's you like your CP carries which are more focused around their auto attacks to some extent, such as your CP Idris and such as your Varia.
Well, those two are weird because they're kind of the basic attack crystal heroes, which have, in my eyes, been seeing a rise as of late, where you can still get that damage down, a la Vox, a la Idris, a la Varia, uh, but you still have powerful abilities, and I find that that kind of route, going forward, is something that we do have to kind of take a look at, right? Because depending on how it's balanced, you can have incredibly strong heroes. We all know the infamous Vox, but imagine Idris with like the weapon power kind of numbers that he sometimes gets during his dives. Um, I don't think that really anyone wants to play like a weapon Idris or Varia, but it's still kind of risky, you know.
Yeah, weapon Varia sort of fall down. I still think weapon Idris can be effective. CP is most definitely better though, just simply because of the damage numbers you pick out. But that is an interesting trend you touched upon. The fact that we are actually seeing more of these CP auto attack carries in the meta. Stuff like your CP Idris, your CP Vox, obviously incredibly strong right now. Didn't he did receive some changes in 3.0. His crystal ratio on his basic attacks got upped, and the bonus damage from pulse got decreased. But in all honesty, the bonus damage from pulse decrease isn't that influential, given you get pretty good scaling out of your CP items on it anyway. And buffing his crystal attack ratio on his basic attacks does allow him to 1v1 enemy heroes better. So we're getting into weird states now where CP carries can out damage weapon carries from auto attacks, which is a very weird concept for me. It feels like CP carries have to somehow be slightly reliant on landing their abilities at some point, surely. But then you have stuff like a CP Idris, for example, which obviously crazy damage from landing your chakra, but you don't necessarily need to land it to win a fight. He can win a fight just by auto attacking because those auto attacks do so much damage.
Well, see, who else does that? Like, one of the old school heroes that did that kind of auto attack kind of style, Dagio, and he was funny because he had, at least he in my eyes, had like no damage unless you set your enemies on fire. You give them the gift of fire, and then finally you could actually hurt them. But otherwise, you did like nothing. Right? Like you're sitting your basic attacks out there, and you're sitting there going, "Oh God, why did I ever decide that this was a good idea?" Um, and now, if anyone's really playing a crystal, a crystal adagio, I question their sanity. But I mean, like at least there, you have to do something to get your ridiculous damage, right? Now it's all right. We're gonna throw a couple of basic attacks your way, and that's pretty much it. At least higher skill cap, higher
Yeah,
skill cap.
Adagio has a really high skill cap because of that interplay between his two abilities. He has to set the enemy burning with his gift of fire, then use his agent of wrath upon himself to empower his attacks against the target with gift of fire, and then he can shred them. But that's quite a lot of interplay you have to pull off, and and Adagio hasn't been generally that effective in terms of what sort of general gameplay we've been seeing in 5v5. But I want to touch on an interesting trend which you've seen I've seen a lot of pros being put up, and I've seen multiple videos on Twitter with insane damage numbers from this weapon Rona. But it's not weapon Rona as you traditionally build her with Serpent's Mask breaking points sustained through fights build. What these players have been doing is they've been picking up a Sora Blade and then going into critical strike on Rona, which not only makes her a crazy split pusher, it means that she can two-shot carries with no defense. I've seen you can like, if she uses her second stroke of her B activation when she has max blood rage, she can deal over 1,000 weapon power damage to a target, which
Ah.
is just insane.
Yeah, no, we've seen a ton of that, right? Where just random stuff just becomes super overpowered because just absolutely no one kept it in check. And surprise, you're like, oh, it can two-shot carries that are unarmored. Have you seen really anyone, any carries building defense?
Yeah,
Like seriously?
defense is definitely quite. It's a rarity on carries. Like generally, what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing a sort of either 2 or 3 tank split. I feel like I've seen personally, you either go 2 tank plus a healer at somewhere in your comp, or you go 3 tank and then 2 range carries, and then those 2 range carries basically always go 4 offense items minimum. 5 offense items becoming relatively common for them simply because you can actually get away with not building defense now in 5v5 because you have far more. You have, well, essentially 2 more heroes to peel for you. So building no defense is actually a viable strategy now, which is what I like because it definitely shifts to mechanical skill more, but then it also opens up more build opportunities, which is always brilliant.
It, it does. The other thing though is that there just the pick potential right now is just so high, and I find that uh, as we keep reducing the amount of defense that we have as Fountain becomes less and less important, we're going to see the rise of these kind of pick style compositions where exactly right, or we have a Rona just come in, basically two-shot people and then get out, so that you can't get counterattacked by whatever the enemy team has. And those kind of styles are always fun to just watch the just teams explode. You ever get like a Baron doing that where like he jumps in, blows up the entire enemy team, and then gets out because he's lost all his damage. Um, those are probably the most fun games of League of Legends that you can watch if anyone ever does.
Yeah, and like if we're seeing the rise of sort of those pick style things, one of the heroes which is actually very good at that, but almost from a sort of weapon power standpoint, is you've actually got a Gwen who actually has very substantial burst within her kit because of her boomstick perk, which every now 1.4 seconds used to be 1.6, now 1.4, receiving a decent sized buff this patch. Um, you can now use that perk combined with a tension bow, which also received a buff on its base weapon power, increased from 45 to 60. So, relatively substantial stuff there on the tension bow buffs as well. Combining those 2 options, you can get picks, but without needing to do very much to get the pick, because you can just combine that tension bow proc with your boomstick and just chunk a carry down to half health. Then use your A to slow, follow up with the second boomstick, and that carry's dead. And just that little combo, you've suddenly got a pick, but you haven't needed to do very much to get that pick. You haven't needed to commit with an afterburn, commit with your Rona, use your Baron jump jets. You've only needed to auto attack them twice and use one slow from a range carry, and that's part of the reason why Gwen is in such a good spot right now.
Yeah, Gwen is one of the funnier heroes because again, exactly as you're saying, she's one of the harder carries to actually get on top of. I would say, otherwise, you look at it, you would say that Vox would be the other one that would be the most difficult to actually try and lock down. And Gwen's funny because she's the only one now, the only carry now that has a reflex block because she has it built in. You have to take the reflex block. Surprise, you get defense even if you didn't want it. Um, and so now that she has that, that's actually a huge advantage in her favor because she does have movement that she otherwise wouldn't have. Um, and oh god, I think that SCMC just wants her to be somewhat viable as she's getting the Chinese New Year skin, right? She's got to have the burst. Let her have the
Mm.
fireworks.
Yeah, and the other hero who's getting that Chinese New Year skin is Reza, and he happens to be in a pretty good spot as well. You'll find it. So obviously, there's the potential of this correlation. Nobody's going to buy the skin if the hero which you're buying the skin for is utter crap. So you're going to want to make the hero decent, and Rez is definitely in a very good spot right now. He's seeing some slight changes from his 3v3 playstyle into his 5v5. Previously in 3v3, you'd want to do your damage and then get out. You sort of pull off your AB combo, then get back out, and then pull it off again, and then get back out, sort of dipping in and out of fights. Now, a much hardcore commit with Reza is seen in team fights, at least. His lane trading still works in the same way, but in team fights, he's much more about almost sacrificing himself, but making it a beneficial sacrifice. So, diving right into the backline, taking out the enemy hypercarry, that CP Vox, that CP Celeste, that big Celeste or Scarf in the backline. Yes, he may die along the way, but if he achieves that objective of taking out that carry, it's a perfectly reasonable trade for his team because then his team has their own big weapon power carry on the backline to do the same thing which the enemy carry would have been doing. And that's why he's in a good spot because he's one of the best heroes at achieving that with his Netherform detonator, which also in itself received a buff to its fortified health and to its crystal ratio. So he's in a very good spot as well as a hero.
No, he is. So another thing that I personally want to talk about, uh, as we are finally actually in the release of 3v3, it's just kind of a little bit of a look back on things that have changed, major things that we see, and we can definitively say, "Hey guys, this isn't beta anymore. This is definite. This is permanent, and we're definitely gonna have this." So I kind of wanted to look at the UI. So I kind of want your take on that, Pirate, before I kind of say anything. And why not?
Are we talking about the in-game UI or the out-of-game UI in particular?
Let's go with the out of game UI first. We can kind of we'll look at the changes. Yeah.
The out-of-game UI, I still get why people don't like it in sort of its bit resemblant of other mobile MOBAs. But personally, I think it's so much better than the old one. It's just so much more streamlined and so much more easy to navigate. Whereas the old UI, the original thing which they had with the old UI was very good and very streamlined. But the problem was, once they had that, they kept layering on top of it extra feature after feature after feature. So in the end, it became this sort of stacked mess of ideas all crammed together into one user interface. And just by redesigning it and streamlining it, I think they've made it a lot better. It could still do with improvements, such as making it a bit more obvious where you got your quests and maybe bringing back that little scarf icon, because I love that little scarf icon. But other than that, other than small improvements, I think overall the change for the UI was quite positive. What did you think of that?
Yeah,
Change?
I was honestly kind of on the more negative note, right? Because uh, I had really liked the original UI. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Like that old school actual menu, kind of looked like a single player, basically like a single player RPG because you have like three or four options, and that's it, right? It's always cool. You know what I'm talking about though, right? Not like the
Yeah.
last one, but the like original OG.
The OG, the OG UI. Yeah, I get what you mean with that. And I say another one of the little small things you pick up on is maybe stuff like the news tab isn't as like you don't see it because you don't have that scrolling feed at the homepage which you had previously. But I have to say personally, I definitely I maybe the change of color schemes is what's putting people off. Change from the sort of darker, sort of more brooding style of the old UI into the more openly vibrant style of the new UI, which maybe doesn't mesh with some of the stuff which you're seeing on Sovereign's Rise, which isn't a very cartoony map, really.
Well,
It's quite it's a more, it's not brooding, but it's a darker and more considered map.
honestly, if you think about it, Sovereign's Rise is a pretty depressing map, right? So you're there, lore-wise, because the Storm Queen said, you know what, let's just put you there. I feel like it. You know, and we're gonna put some dragons on the map that they're gonna be there. You're gonna take them, but they're my personal pet dragons. Haha, Scarf. Yeah, you're cool, but you're not as cool as you're not as cool as the Black Clawmeister. And and so you basically run around fighting for the purest form of Halcyon crystals, which, by the way, on the Halcyon Fold, we were fighting for like merely terrible crystals. They're like half Halcyon crystals, not near as cool. So we're going to fight for those. She just randomly has to happen to have the best Halcyon crystals in the world. We go fighting for them. And she just destroys them for entertainment. Like every like 20 minutes, the purest of Halcyon just gets destroyed. You're basically a slave who fights for the amusement of the Storm Queen. And by the way, the river it pours down on on an unsuspecting town further down, and it pollutes their water as they drink that water, and then they all die. Does that sound like a very fun map to you?
No, no, it doesn't. Even though I'm there laughing
Uh,
at the sort of horrible irony and inconvenience of it all. No, it doesn't sound like a fun map, and maybe there's that disconnect with the out of game UI and the in game UI in that aspect. Definitely, given you're moving on to what you've ultimately framed as an incredibly depressing battlefield. But what do you then think of the in-game user interface?
well,
Because I know you've unlike me, you've actually had experience of other MOBAs
yeah.
interfaces more.
Well, I mean, do have to say that most of my other MOBAs are on PC, so it kind of changes things because I'm much more comfortable on PC than I am my phone, which kind of ironic considering that I'm doing what I'm doing, but whatever. Uh, so I don't mind it. It's just that on my phone, I feel like I'm just like zoomed out, right? Like I'm less a part of the action and more that there is action, but I'm less a part of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really notice that when I do switch between playing that 3v3 game I have to play per week to clear my decay, and those multitude of 5v5 games I play. That is the only reason I play 3v3 is just to clear my decay and make sure I don't lose my Vainglorious, because in case like the ranking system on 5v5 is in any way based on what happened in 3v3, like you get some sort of head start for where you were. In case that is the case, I'm just maintaining my rank. Also, I like the fact that I'm still Vainglorious. It just pleases me. But it's really noticeable when you move between the modes, between 5v5 and 3v3, how much more 5v5, you're definitely more of a spectator controlling your hero, whereas in 3v3 you feel a lot more like you are your hero. There's less of a disconnect there, and that's probably because, and it's partly because the camera is zoomed in a lot more on 3v3, but that's obviously because the map is different sizes and everything, and you've got to account for that, lost the word there. But there's definitely a difference in the sort of immersion you're getting. I think 5v5 it's a more tactical immersion in the game, whereas 3v3 is a more visceral immersion.
Yeah, well, so I do have to ask though, what's 3v3?
It is. It is disappearing, which is a shame. But the thing is, 5v5's just got so many more possibilities. within it as a mode than 3v3 does. The 3v3 is great for a almost high octane action fix, but it just doesn't have the tactical depth which 5v5 does, and I feel like that's what a lot of people play a MOBA for, is for that, especially a MOBA like Vainglory. They play it for that tactical depth you get with 5v5.
So I do have to say though, can I officially make this call? Um, 3v3 is officially a brawl mode.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Because it obviously there's much more happens within these span. Obviously, your kill count is generally quite a bit lower, but that's simply because there's less people to kill. But the action in, like, it was weird because with the originally with 5v5, you would have almost 3v3 style games in 5v5 because, like, at the start everyone would just be fighting all the time because that's what you did in 3v3. But then people realized that actually maybe we shouldn't be fighting all the time. Fighting all the time, maybe a bit of a risky idea. Maybe we should be doing things like farming and laning and ganking, that sort of thing, rather than constantly team fighting every second of the day. But it is nice to go back into 3v3 and have that team fight, just because it is refreshing just to have sort of 20 minutes of solid team fighting. And even if you lose those 20 minutes, it can still be quite fun simply because it's just so different to 5v5.
No, it is. And it is a sad state of affairs when people can say, you know what, let's just ignore 3v3. You know, the game mode that we've been playing for the last couple of years, yeah, it's been fun, but sorry guys, we're packing up, we're going home. But on that note, on that slightly depressing note, slightly more depressing than drinking uh, the Sovereign Dry's Kool-Aid or water, uh, we will be having to head out and leave and be abandoned like the 3v3 map. So, thank you all for listening in onto the Warhorn Podcast. My name is Tree60 No Scope.
And my name is the Pirate King. Thank you very much for listening.